Peter Tatchell, the case for the defence?
Well, I'm sure Edward Snowden's flight, first to Hong Kong and then to Russia, has nothing whatsoever to do with his endorsement of those regimes. He's gone there because that's the way he can get out of the reach of the US authorities. And I think we have to recognize that whatever we feel about Edward Snowden, he is clearly an idealistic young man, motivated by humanitarian, human rights ideals. He's taken this stand at great personal risk. He stands to gain nothing from this. He did it because he believes that the American people and the people of the world have a right to know what the American National Security Agency and Britain's spy agency, GCHQ, are doing in secret in our name. He believes that we have a right to know. He did not expose any state secrets. He merely exposed the systematic surveillance of millions of private citizens worldwide who have committed no crime, who are unlikely to commit any crime, and who should not be subjected to a big brother state surveillance.
Mr. Pritchard, Ian Harris has tweeted us this afternoon. Hi, Ian. He says, if you whistleblow on the NHS, you're a hero. If you whistleblow on government torture, you're a traitor.
Well, the NHS doesn't deal daily in stopping terror plots. And the fact is the majority, if not all, are personnel in the security service, in SIS and in GCHQ, are dedicated professionals who want to protect this country, to protect you and me, your viewers and your listeners. And they do that every single day of the week. And I'm afraid that in a society and in a world that is less safe and where there are enemies of this country and enemies of the United States, the people that want to blow up men, women and children, as we've seen on our television screens over the last few years, we need to have secrets. We need to be able to listen to their telephone conversations, to monitor their traffic on the internet, and in so doing, if we're capturing other data, which is later discarded by those who are not a threat to the state, I don't have a particular issue with that. I think that if as a result of leaking this secret and top secret information, would-be terrorists or existing terrorists change their ways, perhaps dealing in paper rather than electronic communications, that does endanger lives. So I'm afraid, in my view, Mr. Snowden, who swore an allegiance to uphold and protect the United States, has put lives at risk in the United States and also amongst its allies, including the United Kingdom. So I think he's a traitor, not a hero.
Peter Tatchell, if what he wanted to do was shine a light in the murkier corners of espionage, why didn't he do that anonymously?
Well, I think it would have been very difficult for him to do it anonymously with credibility. And regardless of what his motive is, the fact is that he took this incredible personal risk. I don't think you or I would have been prepared to do this because we would have known the consequences. But he believed, following his conscience, in the tradition, the Gandhian tradition of non-violent civil disobedience, that he had a higher moral duty to the US Constitution and to the people of the United States to tell them the truth. And we should remember that the right to privacy is guaranteed under the US Constitution, under our Human Rights Act, and under the European Convention on Human Rights. Privacy can only be invaded by the state with good reason that is targeted and proportionate. This was a blanket snooping of millions and millions of citizens, untargeted, indiscriminate. That is wrong, but I agree with Mark Pritchard. Where there is evidence that people are engaged in or likely to be engaged in acts of terrorism, then of course it is quite right that the state should eavesdrop on them and intercept their communications. That is a right, proper and responsible thing to do, but not this blanket snooping and not without the agreement of the people and the government. The point is, this snooping, this systematic snooping by GCHQ and the American National Security Agency have never been officially approved by either our Parliament or the US Congress. And I think that political oversight and approval is essential.
Peter, there is political oversight. We have the Intelligence Services Committee in Parliament. They've been given more powers. You all know that the Foreign Secretary oversees GCHQ and SIS or MI6. and the Home Secretary, the Security Service, or MI5. So they're not out there doing their own thing. They are subject to parliamentary scrutiny. They are subject to ministerial scrutiny. We also have commissioners and very senior judges overseeing most of their operations. And, these staff all have to sit, pretty much all of them, their own legal exam. So they're fully aware of the law, but we cannot have CIA agents or SIS agents, and we've had them in the past in this country, going off and saying that they're a whistleblower, giving over top secret information potentially to our adversaries in other parts of the world. I have to say, Kay, there's a real opportunity for Russia here. And that is that they need to get Mr. Snowden on a plane to the United States to come before a court. He will have his day in court rather than have his day in a newspaper. And I think that China, the People's Republic of China, missed a real opportunity to show that China does recognize the international rule of law. They missed an opportunity by not ensuring that he got on a plane to Washington or London and then on to Washington, D.C. So I hope that Russia will learn the lessons from China's mistake. And the final point I would make is that I think when this is all over, and wherever Mr. Snowden ends up, how long the relationship Mr. Snowden had with the People's Republic of China. Was this just an overnight arrangement, or was this a longer-term arrangement? And those are very, very serious questions that at some point will be answered.
You're not buying into that, though, Peter Tatchell, are you?
Well, to me, it's very clear Edward Snowden exposed the system of mass state surveillance. He did not expose individual specific state secrets which are likely to endanger anybody anywhere. He was exposing the system, and that's very, very different. I think, to go back to the original analogy that someone drew about the NHS, if Edward Snowden had been an Iranian, North Korean or Russian citizen who'd exposed global snooping by their regimes, the United States would have hailed him as a hero. It seems there are double standards at work here. We've got to recognize that the US Congress and the British Parliament have never voted to put this system of state snooping in place. They never agreed to it. There was no parliamentary debate, no parliamentary vote. There should have been, and of course I would support a vote in favor of such a system if it was targeted to identify and bring to book people who are engaged in acts of terrorism or preparing acts of terrorism. I wholly support that. But this blanket, indiscriminate snooping is not right in a free and democratic society. We do not live in a big brother state yet, and I hope we never will.
Okay.
And Peter, I agree.
Can I just interrupt you a second, if I may, please, Mr. Pritchard, because it is an absolutely fascinating debate, but we are almost out of time. But I wonder if I could just ask for final thoughts from both of you as to what should happen next to Mr. Snowden. And as far as, if you'll forgive me to say, a case for the prosecution, Mr. Pritchard, what do you think should happen?
Well, I think he should go to Washington, D.C. and make his case openly in a court of law. And if the US government have broken any laws, I'm sure that my colleagues on Capitol Hill, in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, will call the necessary people to book, whether they're the heads of the intelligence agencies or other people perhaps in the White House, Pentagon or State Department or Fort Meade National Security Agency. But the point is that if he stays in Russia, having come from China, then goes on to Cuba, I think he has no credibility whatsoever when he says he wants to speak out for a freedom of speech, speak up for liberty, and stand up against oppression.
Okay, final thought for the defence, Mr. Tatchell?
Well, I hope for all our sakes, Edward Snowden will get to a place of safety where he will not be persecuted for telling the truth and revealing the secret regime of spying that the British and American governments have perpetrated on our peoples without our knowledge or consent. I believe he is an heroic human rights defender. I believe the US and British governments should not be targeting the messenger, but look at the message he's giving. The message is these mass surveillances of millions of people worldwide have happened without the approval of the US Congress or the British Parliament, and that itself is a threat to democracy and civil liberties.
Gentlemen, it's fascinating to hear both of you as always. Thank you so much for joining us on Sky News. Thank you very much indeed. Just a couple of thoughts here. Actually, let's do some breaking news, should we? MPs have summoned police to speak